monster pickup. It's one of the best December pickups I've ever seen in, the NFL. He came in, instantly ran for 300 yards in 2 games, and then you see him against Dallas, and you're like, this guy, what he's able to do, and, the type of veteran, leadership he brings, and the, obviously the Super Bowl, title that he won with Aqib Talib and Wade Phillips, obviously he just adds to that room. And then when you talk about somebody that's so, such a teammate where he doesn't care if he's in or if he's out, it really, it goes to show you. Him and Gurley are thunder and lightning. And while, people have been raving about Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, guys, I can tell you from the get-go, Mark Ingram's a little overrated. I think Alvin Kamara should really be the bell cow there. They should let Mark Ingram leave because I think he doesn't do really any justice when you have a guy like Alvin Kamara. Whereas I feel as though, Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson, it's kind of like, they're not, I wouldn't say they're the same back, but the way C.J. Anderson is playing right now, he's one of the best in the game in his position because he's so fresh. You have to keep in mind, he didn't really play this year. So it's like having, a top 5 back behind Gurley, the way he runs. So it's been a lot of fun, and he's the X factor this Sunday.
So last week, one of the things I noticed across the Rams season, honestly, for me at least, I was skeptical of them because versus the contenders, the Bears, the Eagles, they came up short. And even versus Kansas City, they kind of – Kansas City had a chance to win that game in the last moments, and they honestly looked like they were going to until Peters made that pick. So for me, last week was just a big indicator of them, getting it put on them a little bit early and battling back from adversity. And also, the biggest thing I took away from that game was the Rams' run defense really showed up. And it showed up versus Zeke and that front 5 of Dallas, which is a little overrated but still pretty good. So what do you make of that run defense showing up?
Well, I'll say this. I think the run defense has always been there. I think Wade Phillips does tend to get really aggressive, similar to former defensive coordinator Greg Williams. I think when you look at it, the problem is, a lot of these really high octane defenses where you're talking about an attacking defense, and you'll have offenses that will scheme against your defense. And what I mean by that is when you have an Ezekiel Elliott and you have an offensive line the way they do, and guys, that have the football IQ to maintain those blocks and pull the guard. Zach Martin, one of the best in the league. They will use your, over pursuit to your advantage, to their advantage. So essentially you're looking at Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is a gap shooter. The dude will go right through the A gap with no issue whatsoever. Yep. So that's exactly what a trap runs for. So when you have him go through the A gap, now all of a sudden Zeke's running through the B gap, and you just took Aaron Donald out of the play. And they were trying to do that, and the Rams actually, and this is what I think why Aaron Donald had his worst performance per Pro Football Focus, is that I think that coming into the game, Wade Phillips, was going to make sure that they were not going to go hyper aggressive. They were going to let Sue be that guy, which he was.
Which he showed
up. He
up.
had a phenomenal game.
Yeah, he did. He dominated.
They were actually going to sell out for the run and have, Aaron Donald be that guy. And I think that was the difference maker. And on top of that, Corey Littleton balled out. He had a huge third down, pass breakup. He made a huge tackle. Just little things like that, that I noticed. Guys that were a little quiet, John Johnson, who's been, really tearing it up lately. He was a little quiet, and, Nickel Roby-Coleman as well. But, the rule of thumb is if you're, a DB, you want to be as quiet as possible. You don't want to hear your name called because that means you're doing something right.
But speaking of coverage and DBs, when I look at why Mike Thomas had such a huge game last week, the Eagles were playing a lot of zone. And he was finding all the spots. Pretty much he was catching it in every pocket of their defense and getting run after the catch. And when I look at, let's say, the one deficiency for the Rams is the coverage, essentially. They are prone to giving up yards. And with their linebackers, I think if Benjamin Watson can play this game, he's an X factor for them. But most importantly, it's Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib is physical. He's proven what he can be. But I think when it comes to the secondary for the Rams, their biggest issue is going to be how much they gamble with Marcus Peters. And they have Ted Ginn back, they have receivers. It's pretty much, obviously, the first option is always Michael Thomas and Kamara. But where do you see the most potential, or dare I say it, most vulnerability when it comes to the Rams secondary in this game?
So, really, I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing the most vulnerability, I guess, is really, like you mentioned. I mean, if Peters does, because, I mean, this is somebody that really focuses on the quarterback's eyes. You'll see it. I mean,
definitely.
He gets bit. He bites a lot on that. So I think the key is that you want to keep Talib on Michael Thomas. Now, I think they'll kind of mix it up a little bit, but I think really it's Peters, because Peters is that kind of all-or-nothing guy, similar to Janoris Jenkins, who used to play for the Rams back in St. Louis. I just think he has the same type of qualities where, I mean, he could really hit home, and you have a pick six, and it's a game-altering play. But, I mean, you also saw, 45-35, that game should not have been that score. Marcus Peters really could have gotten that stop when they were down by 3. And that, if he held his own. And really what he did is he bit too hard, and then he tried to kind of throw his hand up there to tip it, and it was too late. So, I totally agree with you with the Eagles, because I was watching that game, and really, it's one of my biggest issues, I guess, with the Saints is, like, they have been starting off really slow as of late. And I'll tell you right now, the reason the Rams are considered the underdogs, not, just for the Saints, but they're literally the underdog left in the playoffs, a 13-3 team that has the lowest Vegas odds left. But I'll tell you why, because I think people, everyone saw those games on Sunday Night Football, and I'm still not sure to this day what that was all about. I think a lot of it had to do with Todd Gurley playing like half healthy, and then one of the games he didn't even play. But I think that was something to really kind of quiet everything down. It humbled the Rams. I think it benefited the Rams. When you look at the Chicago Bears game, I'll tell you exactly why they're not in the playoffs right now. Because look at the way the Bears have dominated that game against the Rams in the cold, environment of Chicago. Look at the way they dominated that game, and they only won by 9.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with the Eagles. The Eagles went to L.A. They really dominated that game. Jared Goff literally gave, I think it was Fletcher Cox, he just gave him the ball. The Rams had a chance at the end of the game to win, to tie the game. Actually, I think to win it. I mean, they literally was a Josh Reynolds. I mean, if he was 6'5", the Rams won that game. Like it was that close. So, I think those two teams not being able to finish games like that, I think is a big issue. Where the Rams, they already did this against New Orleans, where they played them tough, and it was a close game. That game really started off, the Rams looked good. And then what happened was, guys, if you didn't watch the game, or if you don't remember, they went for it on 4th down, and they had a fake punt. And it was bizarre because Johnny Hecker ran to the right.
Yeah, I remember that.
Outside to the right, and he got kind of tripped up. But, I mean, he was clearly past the 1st down marker. It was ruled, turnover downs on the field. And then they reviewed it, and they said they couldn't find evidence. And that changed the entire complexion of the game. I mean, instead you're looking at the Saints, now going down, scoring an easy touchdown, and it kind of just threw the Rams into a hole. But the key is they clawed back. They, scored 21 unanswered to tie it up, and, that was huge for me. Regardless of the outcome, to do that on the road when you got off to such a rough start was huge. Now, this Sunday, I will say this. I think the Rams have the advantage. And the reason I say this is because even though they're not at home, they've been humbled. They lost to Chicago. They lost to this team. They lost to the Eagles. And I think that those 3 games humbled them for this moment. I think you saw a different Rams team against Dallas. I thought they left a lot of points on the board, and had they executed, that would have been a huge blowout. I think obviously the red zone offense has to get better. Jared Goff at any point on the field is really a 60% completion percentage quarterback. Until he hits the red zone, you're looking around the 55 to 52 range. So that needs to get better. But with the Saints are winning games, and because of that, they weren't really humbled at the end of the year the way the Rams were. So the Saints were getting beaten by Tampa Bay on the road the whole game. They came back and win. They didn't, learn anything. There was no lesson learned. They played against a Cam Newton with half an arm, and they only won by a possession. I mean, they would have lost that game if they played the third stringer. And it's like, again, you win that game, you didn't learn anything. When you learn when you lose. And I think that's one of the keys here, because I'll tell you guys, week 17, I know the Saints lost their game, but the Saints had an excuse. They didn't play their starters. They played their defensive starters, who got abused by a third-string quarterback, at Kyle Allen at Houston. But
Yikes.
they didn't have their offense in. So they didn't learn it. They were partying in the locker room after. It's like they're ready for the play. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think
I agree with everything you're saying as far as the Rams being a different team after those losses. But let me ask you real quick, give me your most objective as possible final score for this next upcoming NFC Championship game.
So I have 41-30 Rams.
Wow.
Damn. Okay.
All right.
I like the confidence.
Yeah.
Well, win, lose, or draw. Win, lose, or draw. Because you're probably going to be go for it?
Yeah, so here's the deal, guys. I think the Rams are going to get off to a hot start. I really do. And I think the Saints, the constant, we're going to start off slow, and then we're going to hope that a team has, Nick Foles throw 50 yards down the field at Marshawn Lattimore, and we're going to hope that all of a sudden, magically, the tide shifts our way. And, I mean, guys, I'm still blown away that the Saints didn't win that game by more, because, I mean, they dictated the entire game after the pretty much the first half, and the Eagles, only lost by a touchdown. Really, what I look at this game is I think the Rams, the last time they played, they deferred. And whether that was the smart play or not, I think they have learned now you got to get the ball first. Obviously, if they win the toss, I think they have to receive. I think they have to get on the board first, put some pressure on the Saints. I think Sheldon Rankins not being there is huge. They haven't allowed a 100-yard it was like a 100-yard rusher in the last 25 games.
Wow.
I think that ends I really think it ends this Sunday. I also think the Drew Brees Dome playoff record, him undefeated, ends this Sunday. I believe that the last 10 conference champions that have won, and they were at home. I think that ends Sunday. I'll tell you guys, I say this all the time. I would not want to be a team that is playing a team that they beat earlier in the season. There's no
definitely
win. There's nothing you're gaining out of that. That's why if the Rams play the Chiefs, that would be brutal. I would almost have to pick the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. I think the Rams and Patriots
that would be crazy.
Are perfect, because then they can get revenge and everything.
Former cross-state rivals.
That's kind of how I feel. So,
but with all that,
I mean, yeah.
But with all that, whether win or lose, Senior Bowl is going on right now. All-Star games and everything. Obviously, This isn't the perfect. This Rams team isn't perfect, But who would you say they should be looking at going